What's up, everybody? Tricks Ridiculous back with another Wonderlands video, and at the time this video is coming out, it is only hours away from the launch of Wonderlands. If you're like me, I am super excited to dive in and just completely go to town on this game. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to put out a video just showcasing the very first character I do play in the game and how I plan on building them. All right, so I've decided to do a mix of a Brrr-Zerker-Stabbomancer, and I've actually got two kind of skill trees lined up in this skill calculator. So the first one that you're looking at right this second is how I plan on actually leveling the character. I do plan on going down the Berserker tree as far as leveling, but then this, what you're looking at here is going to be kind of my crowd control, add clear, end game build, and then I'm going to have more of a boss damage, boss farmer, single target DPS build that I'll show you after that. Now, just a quick disclaimer, I have not actually played Wonderlands yet. I did not have any type of early access, anything like that. So all of this is just based on known information, from me as just a normal player, looking in and just kind of seeing the skills and abilities, as well as what other, content creators may have discovered or shown off in regards to perk skills, items that have dropped and things like that. But that's really it. Before we dive into it, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. I'm going to be doing a ton of Wonderlands content, so really hope to have you along for the ride. Those are easy ways to support the channel, and I really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's jump right in. So you can see here, I will be starting on the Berserker, and I'll kind of be working my way down the Berserker tree. Going to be using Dreadwind, I think, at least for leveling and for crowd control. I do believe Dreadwind or Feral Surge would be the best for, the Brrr-Zerker-Stabbomancer. Ghostblade is kind of cool, but I don't think that it's going to work for this purpose. And then From the Shadows we'll actually be using in the secondary build. So for kind of the more crowd control, I think the Dreadwind is going to be the most fun and probably the strongest one for what we're going to build here. But we're basically going to be coming right down the Berserker tree first. We're going to be grabbing Savagery for the 20% melee damage and 5% enrage duration. Now, the two feats here, I should kind of talk about this first. So, Rage of the Ancients, basically whenever you do use an action skill, you become enraged, adding bonus frost damage to all of your attacks. And the enraged duration will not deplete while an action skill is active and ends if the Fate Maker goes in to save your soul, obviously. So activating an action skill while already enraged restores a portion. So you can see it does 10% bonus frost damage to all of your attacks. It lasts for 15 seconds. And then if you reactivate your action skill while it's still going, you'll get an extra 35% of the 15 seconds back. Now, like it says here, it will not deplete while an action skill is active. So if we're using Dreadwind, that lasts for 6 seconds. So we're going to become enraged immediately upon using it, but we're going to get basically that free 6 seconds of enraged before the actual timer starts counting down. So getting free frost damage there. And then when I say 15 seconds, we're going to get that extra 5 seconds. So that'll be a total of 20 seconds plus 20 on our melee damage. We're also going to grab Ancestral Frost for that extra 20% frost damage, just some extra damage there. Going to go with the old ways, up to 30% bonus damage when very close to the enemy, up to 39.5% damage reduction when very close to the enemy. Those are big bonuses. 30% bonus damage basically to all of your melee attacks, and then essentially a 40% damage reduction when up close. These are very, very large numbers. So I think this, for kind of that Berserker, going to be pretty sweet. We're going to be moving, we're going to be hitting. I think it's going to work really well. Icebreaker, 30% increased damage dealt against frozen enemies. Now you got to remember, when an enemy, this is just a Borderlands thing. This has nothing to do with this game in general. It's just always in Borderland. When an enemy is frozen, they do take 300% melee damage specifically. So we obviously want to be freezing enemies. That's why the Berserker does a lot of freeze damage, right, and frost damage. Increased damage to enemies that are frozen, that's kind of a no-brainer for a melee build like this. Then we're going to be using Cold Snap, so movement speed plus 9% and frost efficiency plus 24. While enraged, this effect is doubled. We do plan on being enraged quite a bit, so basically going to get anytime we're in rage, we're going to get that 18% movement speed and then essentially 50% frost efficiency, making it very, very easy to freeze targets. So definitely sweet one there. And then coming down here, going to be using Iron Squall, fire rate up 15%, melee attack speed up 15%, effect doubled while in rage, so essentially 30% fire rate and 30% melee attack speed. Definitely going to work really well for this melee build. We're going to be using Blast Chill. Whenever the Fate Maker deals melee damage to an enemy, there's a 20% chance to release a Frost Nova, dealing frost ability damage to nearby enemies. Frost Nova cannot critically hit, so it basically does essentially a 20% chance. So 1 in every 5 melee hits, we're going to have a chance of doing 25% extra melee damage in kind of a surrounding area. And remember, it's frost, right? So that's going to be a chance to freeze those enemies as well with very high frost efficiency. I think that's going to work out pretty well. And then lastly, on this tree, we're going to be using, of course, Blood of the Fallen. It's a kill skill as the Fate Maker's, or the Fate Maker's remaining action skill cooldown is reduced by a percentage. If the action skill is currently active, instead you restore its duration. So 20% cooldown or 20% duration restored. So basically what this is telling us is, when we're in Dreadwind here, when we're killing people, for that 6 seconds, we're going to essentially get 20% time back every time we get a kill. So as long as there's a lot of enemies, we can keep this going for quite a while. Or conversely, when we do not have Dreadwind active, right, every kill we get is going to reduce our cooldown by 20%. So the theme here of the Berserker is that you're going to be coming off of cooldown on your abilities or on your action skill pretty quickly, right, by getting these kills. So we're going to consistently be activating our Dreadwind. We're going to be consistently enraged, getting all of these different buffs, all right? I think that's going to work out really well. Now, I think this pairs very nicely with the Stabbomancer side of the tree as well. So for the feat, the Stabbomancer has Dirty Fighting. Fate Maker's critical hit chance increased by 30%. Now, I want to be clear because this is very easy to misread. It's not 30% like out of 100. It's 30% of like what your crit hit chance currently is. So like whatever your crit, let's say you have a 10% chance to crit hit, it'll increase that by 30%, so it'll be 13%. So it's a passive crit hit chance. It's not horrible, but it's not like so unbelievable. It's a very basic, very useful feat. So not too bad. Good to have. Not really why we're using it, but good to have nonetheless. So what we're using here, we're going to be going 3 points into haste. For that melee attack speed and movement speed. And then when we cast a spell, the bonus is doubled for 12 seconds. All right, so potentially 24% melee attack speed and 24% movement speed. Then we're going to be using Arsenal. Of course, this one is pretty amazing. 15% across the board to melee, spell, and gun damage. Probably just going to be using it for the melee and gun damage. I'm not sure exactly what spells we're going to be using for this. Then Swift Death. While moving, Fate Maker gains 10% increased damage dealt at default walk speed. The faster they move, the greater the bonus. Okay, so we're going to be moving pretty fast. Now, we combining these two together, right, we're going to get, once we cast a spell, so we kind of start off with a spell, we get that 24% move speed. Then we've got another essentially 18% move speed with the with Cold Snap while we're enraged, and then we're going to essentially be able to get as well 20% more move speed. You see there on the Dreadwind, while you're in that, you actually get 20% more move speed. So we're going to be moving quick with all of these abilities, right? Going to be moving very, very quick. So going to get that major damage increase there. And then I've got 1 point into exploit weakness. That was kind of the last point I put into this skill tree. Now this could go anywhere. You could even go with like something like unarmored defense, or even some sort of health regeneration. I can't really say off the bat if these are going to be what I want on this build. That's why I didn't pick them. We'll see. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is subject to change. I haven't played the game yet. I don't know if reserving your ward to get more maximum health, if there's going to be certain shields, or I should say wards, that benefit that, different things like that, or how important some health regen or maximum health is going to be. We can play around with some of this, but I put through 1 point into this. Whenever you apply a status effect to an enemy, which we're going to be applying cryo, the affected enemy takes an extra 2% increased damage from all sources. So kind of a universal buff for your team. 2%, not a lot, but it should be pretty straightforward for us to apply that status effect. But again, that point is variable. Then we're going to be using Shadow Step. So on kill, the next melee attack is a guaranteed crit for 6 seconds. So this can be for the melee crit, right? So when you melee with a crit, you're going to get that kill skill. The next melee is going to be a crit as long as you do it within the next 6 seconds. That's going to be working really well if we stack our melee high enough that we can one-shot guys back to back, right? With the crit, of course, right? So melee a guy or get a kill. Our next melee is guaranteed to be a crit. Hit a guy, it's a crit. If that kills him, the next one's also a crit, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So I think that'll be pretty good. Definitely worth the 1 point there. And then we're using Elusive. So Fatemaker can now shoot and sprint at the same time. Gains a 10% chance to evade incoming damage while moving at default walk speed. The faster they move, the greater the bonus, right? So we'll see as far as the actual shooting and sprinting. That is a generally decent ability in Borderlands. It's not bad at all. It's kind of a playstyle dependent thing. But this is obviously a very high move speed build, right? We're going to be zipping around the map. We are obviously focused more on melee, but we will be shooting our gun as well. But also the chance to evade, right? So 10% chance to evade damage while moving at default walk speed, but especially, like I said, during Dreadwind, during Enrage, and then after we cast a spell, right? If we kind of boom, 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 we're suddenly going to be flying, right? We're going to be absolutely flying. That 10% chance to evade, and I'll have to see exactly, when the game comes out, what those numbers really look like, but tack on that 10% chance to evade, assume it goes up a little bit more, maybe even 20%, right? You've got that. You've also got the 40% damage reduction when very close to an enemy, which obviously we will be, and we're going to be moving pretty quick. So definitely some survivability in this build as well. As far as equipment for this, I mean, like I said, it's really anyone's guess. I would say something hard hitting, even if it's not very fast swinging for a melee weapon. And again, all of this, guys, is pretty subject to change. Once we get into the game, I'm sure we'll find some wacky and wild, unique weapons, melee weapons and guns that do all sorts of wacky things. And that could totally change how this build plays. I can't really say how anything like that is going to fit into this build right now. Obviously, I'll have a full build video, once we've kind of had a chance to go through a lot of the guns and weapons and armor and all that stuff. And we'll see exactly how this can work. But I'm thinking just in general, you're probably going to want some type of high damage, low attack speed, maybe even a low crit chance, maybe even like a bonk weapon, a bonk melee weapon, which those ones are very high damage, but they're low on the crit. But we can circumvent that with having the melee be a guaranteed crit. We can essentially take advantage of the high damage and disregard the low crit chance by having that guaranteed crit. That's an option. We could also get maybe a two-hander, which should be able to do, those are very low attack speed, but do extremely high damage. So again, same idea, right? That we'll be getting those crit hits guaranteed and hopefully be able to kill guys in one shot, at least lower level guys kind of back to back, and just be able to keep things moving. Now, in addition, we're probably going to want some type of weapon that has either like vampirism, right, so that we can get health on hit from our melee hits, or even something like the ancient prefix, which gives us back a little bit of our action skill on melee hit. It's gonna be close. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see how it works with like Dreadwind. If the ancient skill, the melee hit, gives you back your action skill, if you can pretty much like be in Dreadwind all the time, then that might be the one to go with. Or if it's just if it doesn't quite work that way, then maybe the one that's health on hit would probably be the one to go with. It's tough. When you're looking at a melee build in a game like this, you definitely need a lot of sustainability, right, to make a melee build work. But I think intrinsically with the class, it does make sense. It works that way. And then, if we can get a weapon that has kind of life steal on hit, high damage. I mean, obviously the melee piece for this build is going to be what kind of is the centerpiece of the build. So we want to make sure we find a good one. But I'm just thinking, high damage, possibly low crit to make up for high damage, and then with some sort of life steal prefix will probably be your best bet outside of whatever wacky, unique items we find. So that's pretty much it. Again, this is what I'm going to be playing as kind of my starter, right off the bat, going through campaign and leveling, as well as crowd control. I think this is going to be a pretty good crowd control build into the end game. All right, and it's like I said, as far as the ward, the spell, I have no idea what spell this is going to use. I would say like the spells and even the weapons are probably going to be pretty utility more so than actual efficiency. I expect them to be either like support spells, guns that kind of support if there is. I know slag isn't in this game, but even if there's like a gun that makes enemies take more melee damage after you shoot them, something like that would be like a perfect gun for a build like this. But we'll see. We'll see what's out there, and we'll see kind of both on the gun and spell side how all of that will work. All right, so I'm going to move over now to the more boss single target DPS build here, and I think this one is going to be very, very, very powerful, and probably could even be a good crowd control build as well. So let's get into it. So this is going to utilize more of the Stabbomancer tree, if you can tell. And our action skill here is going to be from the shadows. So you enter stealth, turning invisible. While in stealth, all damage dealt is automatically a critical hit, but critical hits are deal reduced damage. So lasts for 8 seconds, and the crit hit damage is cut by 25%. Not a bad deal, 25%, not that much, to be able to do guaranteed crits. If you play Borderlands 3, this is pretty much the fadeaway skill from Flak, and that was a very good ability. Those automatic crits, it's an absolute melter, but I think it'll work really good in this build. Now, as I go through this, I am making some assumptions about how some of the skills will interact with each other and with gear in the game, so if it doesn't turn out to be the way I think it's going to, then that's fine. I'll be the first to admit that, don't follow this guide. But I think if everything works the way I think it'll work, it should be pretty sweet. So we're going to start off with this one. Obviously, Arsenal, melee, gun, and spell damage plus 15%. Pretty basic buffs there. We're going to be using Swift Death, while moving, get that damage increase. Not going to be a very highly mobile build, but just a nice flat damage buff that I think will work really good here. Then we're going to be using 3 to exploit their weakness. So whenever you apply a status effect, the enemy will take 6% increased damage from all sources. We'll definitely have a status effect on a gun at some point. Nimble Fingers, whenever the Fate Maker deals melee damage, their fire rate and spell damage are increased for 8 seconds. So fire rate 18%. That's a very big fire rate increase. And then spell damage 24%. That may end up being good. This isn't very much of a spell build, but we'll see. We're really using this for the fire rate, and you'll see kind of why this, I think, will come into play in just a second. Then we're using Sneak Attack for 15% extra crit hit damage. Pretty straightforward buff there. Going to be using Elusive. Fate Maker can shoot and sprint at the same time. Get that evade, right? So that's going to pair again nicely with Swift Death. We're going to be able to move and shoot. Again, not like a major attacks or movement speed bonus, from this build. We're not going to be moving too fast, but these are pretty decent buffs, and being able to kind of stay moving and even bring them up even higher is pretty nice. Then we're going to be using 1,000 cuts. So crit hits grant 1% increased damage dealt per stack for 12 seconds. This effect can stack melee crits, grant additional stacks, can go up to 25 times. Now, while you're in from the shadows, everything's a crit, right? So you're going to fill this stack up immediately, right? So, and then you're going to get that extra 25% damage pretty much right back from the shadows here, right? So really good damage bonus there. We're going to be using Alchemist Agent. Melee crits apply a random status effect. Status effect damage 10% of melee damage dealt. Okay. So anytime we hit with a melee crit, we're going to get a random status effect. This is, I think, going to be pretty powerful. Now, we already have this one here. Whenever we apply a status effect, the enemy takes 6% increased damage from all sources. This one, we're going to be melee critting a lot, I believe, and I'll show you why in just a sec. But if we can apply multiple status effects on the enemy, I think that will be extremely powerful because this does stack with each unique status effect. So it's 6% per status effect, right? So I think that can be extremely powerful. And really the big ticket item with this is going to be Executioner's Blade. So gun and spell crits have a 20% chance to create an ethereal blade above the target that will impale them after a short delay. Ethereal blades deal melee damage based on the Fate Maker's equipped melee weapon. All right, so this is really the coup de grace of the build. And on this side, it's really just savagery for the melee damage, extra frost damage, right? Because when we go into Enter the Shadows, again, we're going to be getting that Rage of the Ancients for the frost, right? We're going to be able to apply status effects, get those crits, right? Get that frost damage, and then just bolster that a little bit. And then I put a few points into the old ways. This might not even be the best. It just, it could be. It's a very significant boost, and I mean, we're not going to really make it a point to be super close to the enemy, but if we happen to find ourselves there, it's a pretty substantial boost and damage reduction to keep us alive. So that's pretty much that. Really not taking too much from the Berserker skill tree, the Rage of the Ancients and the Enrage, getting that Enrage with the From the Shadows. And remember, the duration of the From the Shadows won't count for the Enrage duration, right? It'll add to it. So we'll be able to be enraged pretty much immediately after From the Shadows. And then this is really where it comes in. Now, this is where I said there's a little bit of speculation with this. The way I'm reading this, it should take all of the characteristics from your melee weapon, right? So it's it's a 20% chance on crits, right? Now, the way I plan on building this is obviously the fastest firing weapon I can find. And if, I'll probably try to keep on like a Jacobs, assuming, there's Jacobs in this game that have that kind of intrinsic crit ricochet like Flak had, But essentially, if you could use like either a Jacobs gun to hit multiple enemies or just something with the absolute fastest rate of fire, we're not really concerned about the gun damage. We really want a high damaging melee weapon to be able to proc this as often as possible for as much damage as we can, all right? So we want a lot of melee damage, right? We want to be able to trigger that 20% chance as many times as possible during that 8 seconds, right? And then while we're doing that, we're getting all these different things, right? We're getting this melee damage, right? Fire rate increase. We're getting this melee crit. Now remember, they're going to all be crits, right? So those ethereal blades are going to also be crits from the shadows, right? So these are going to count as melee crits for a random status effect. You're going to get your melee crits for the additional stacks here, right? You're going to get all that stuff, okay? And where I think it can really be pushed over the top is, again, this is all depending. I think like a melee weapon that's high damage, like a two-hander, right, that has like a very low melee speed, it's irrelevant, right? We don't care about the melee speed because we're only using it for the damage. If there's some weird unique a weird unique melee weapon that has like crazy, like joke high damage numbers, but then like a joke low melee attack speed, if there's some kind of gag weapon like that, that might be perfect for this build because we're not going to care about actually swinging the melee weapon. We're just going to be caring about the ethereal blades doing that extra melee damage, and those are going to be crits as well. So that's really what I'm looking for with this. This is where I think this is going to be extremely powerful. And where I think it can really go bananas is with the perks on the actual melee piece. So if we can find a melee piece, even with like the ancient perk, right? So the ancient perk on a melee piece is essentially whenever you get a melee hit, you restore some of your action skill, right? Whenever restore a portion of your action skill whenever you get a melee hit. Now, if this works the way I hope it works, right, then all of these hits with the ethereal blade will proc that and will essentially get our from the shadows back while we're using it, so that we can pretty much stay in from the shadows at all times. That to me would be extremely powerful. So we'll see. I don't know if that's how it works, but the way I'm reading it, I mean, I do believe that these executioners ethereal blades will do melee damage based on whatever the melee weapon you have equipped is. So if that melee weapon has some sort of perk where dealing melee damage gets you your super back, you know, that might work with this. There might be some sort of caveat where it doesn't, just because of, you know, you can't get it back while it's being used or something like that. And if that's the case, that's totally fine too. We can also use something like even like a vampirism, right? Just to get health back on melee hits, or even spells back on melee hits, right? So you never know. We'll have to see. There's even one that you can steal ammo from enemies, so that could be interesting ways to like get a bunch of rockets back. I don't know. There's definitely some play to it, but I think this combination, this Executioner's Blade with From the Shadows, is going to be, even just as a Stabbomancer in general, I think that's an extremely powerful combination just for the Stabbomancer's tree. But I think the way to really go crazy with it is to focus highly into the melee damage and take advantage of the 100% of melee weapon damage that comes from that, with just the fastest firing gun you can use and the highest damage, lowest attack speed melee weapon you can use. You're essentially circumventing both of their downsides, right? So that's what I'm thinking. So it's going to be between those two builds for me, and obviously you can respec at any time. So these are really going to be the builds. Like I said, I hope that they end up being good. I'm not, these would really be my first official YouTube builds that I'll be building for any Borderlands game. Obviously, I've played a lot of Borderlands games going all the way back to Borderlands 1, but never done any like actual build guides or anything like that for them. But in looking at all of them, this looks like the most fun. The Berserker, for me to start, looks like super duper fun. With the crowd control, with the Dreadwind spin to win. I'm really excited to use it. And then kind of going into that Stabbomancer 3, I think that's going to be absolutely awesome as well. So I'll have full build videos once I get like gear and all that stuff for these guys. But that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this video, just so you guys had an idea of what I'm going to be starting out with. But that's pretty much it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys are planning on starting out with. I'll leave, if you don't already have it, this kind of skills calculator. I'll leave the link to this if you don't already use it down in the video description, so you can get in there and kind of mess around with it if you haven't been already. But obviously, this is not going to be the build I play all the time. This is just going to be what I start with. And obviously, I'll be playing, definitely leveling one of each of the classes to be able to just kind of go test them all out, do all sorts of crazy combinations, and kind of see what happens. That's it from me, though, guys. Like I said, be sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one.